Hello, thank you for joining us. I'm Linda Lamp, and I'm here with my co host, Mary Ardania, and we're hosting our podcast, Let's Become a Beloved Society Conversations Illuminating Your Path to Wholeness. This is episode 30. We've been doing this since last year. Uh, we try to shoot for every Friday. But what I want to announce to everybody is that we're going to take a break for the summer. I have a couple of conflicts next Friday, and then the following Friday's Memorial Day weekend, and then summer hits full tilt. And because I run a lodging business in Seward, Alaska, Angels Rest on Resurrection Bay, in case you're curious, angelsrest.com.
Go
Uh,
there, look at it. It's beautiful.
right. Mary's going to come for a visit this summer. She came up last summer as well with a group of ladies that I host a circle for. So we may, depending on what happens in the world, if some big crisis comes along and we feel that there's a lot of noise in the field that could be aided with our conversation, we'll do a special edition. But otherwise, you can look for us to start back up in the fall, probably right after Labor Day. And today's topic, we're going to do two things. We're going to go back to the conversation of toxic parenting for a bit, and then we're also going to break down the spiritual teaching called the mirror teaching. And so those are the two things that we're going to take up today. I wanted to go back to the toxic parenting conversation because we had a viewer share some comments about their childhood, and it really exposed how difficult some people's childhoods have been, how toxic their parents have been. And when I was doing the show last week, I had some toxic parents in mind, not just my own, but some others. My mother was my non-birth father was not. He wasn't toxic, I wouldn't say, but my mother certainly was. And I had some other toxic parents in mind as well. But the comments revealed that there's a deeper level even of toxicity than what I was thinking about. And so I really wanted to talk to that and dig into it a little bit deeper. Because the one thing that I was reminded of is that when we're a child, we don't realize that this isn't how everybody's house is. Right? When there's toxicity in our homes, we don't know when we're little. We think that that's how life is. And it depends on our life experience when we find out that other people don't live this way. Other people don't have mothers that are screaming at them, "I'll kill you if you tell anybody what goes on here," for example. Just that statement alone to a child is going to make them so frightened and also so unaware that this isn't normal. And the other thing that happens to us as children, and this happens quite a bit in alcoholic homes, drug homes, but I think it probably will happen under any kind of toxicity. We as children come up with the idea that somehow these people are behaving this way because of us. We think it's our fault.
Yeah.
And that can lead to lots and lots of need for healing once we're out of that situation. Because when we're in that situation, we don't have the right perspective and we don't know. And what we're believing is wrong simply because we don't know any better. We believe that this is how life is, and we believe that somehow we're causing this parent When a parent comes at you and says, you're making me spank you, or you're making me whatever, hit you, or whatever they're doing to you because you're so bad, we believe that, because unless there's somebody else in our life telling us differently, we have no other frame of reference. And some people, I'm going to go out on a limb and suggest that some people actually grow up and never discover or realize that this isn't how people live. This isn't healthy. It isn't what's good for us, and it's not how we intended to live when we came here. Mary, you have anything to add at this point?
I'm thinking, I mean, there's this idea in society of what a family is: happy family, mommy, daddy, Mother's Day. Tomorrow, Friday, Sunday, I guess, is Mother's Day. And, um, and when your experience growing up, it's like our parents make our world for us when we're children.
Right.
It's like they're the ones who are defining the world for us.
Right.
And maybe we have a friend and we go to their house and we see that it's different or something, but like, I don't know, I have a lot of feelings just about how hard and confusing it is for a child.
Yeah.
That's all really.
Yeah.
Nothing, no insight right now except that.
Well, I realized that when we were making the suggestions of reaching out to somebody, that depending on the age of the child, they may not even realize that that's an option. And so ultimately, beyond, suggesting that, and the thing is that a child isn't going to see this video probably.
Right.
So there's not much that we can do to help the really small children, I don't think, in this video. But what we can do is we can help perhaps the adolescents who might come across it, and then we can help the adults who've lived through it.
Yeah.
And so for anyone who is still in a toxic relationship, and perhaps this is even not a parent, perhaps it's a spouse, or God forbid, perhaps it's a child of yours abusing you. Getting help, finding someone that you can trust that can get you help to deal with the situation is really your best choice, because nobody comes into this planet to be horrible to one another. It's not our nature. It's not why any of us are here. And so we can know right away that when somebody is being horrible to another person, that person who's being horrible has somehow been broken and hurt themselves. And they are unknowingly and mistakenly projecting their hurt out onto the world in an attempt to make themselves feel better. When we feel alone, it's the most and not necessarily lone, but lonely. When we feel isolated, when we feel we can't connect or relate to anybody else, it is one of the saddest feelings we can feel. And our ego, the wiring of our housing, has a mechanism to try and make us feel better. And this is where that saying, misery loves company, comes from. Because we will make someone else miserable, and now we don't feel alone. So I want to read Lorraine's comment. Great topic, guys. Because of who I am coming to the planet, I knew inside myself that my mother was crazy. I knew inside that I was not what I was told. However, it did affect me. Gratitude, Lorraine. Thank you so much for sharing. This is exactly what these conversations are meant to do, is to engage each other in this greater process of healing. And I know Lorraine personally. I met her a number of years ago in Colorado, and you would never guess the kind of abuse that she sustained, because she is just such a light to the world. She is a beautiful, beautiful soul, and she shines it every day. So I'm so grateful for you sharing your experience, because it's a great example of how we can rise above what's been done to us as children at the hand of people who are trying to perpetrate a chain of pain in order to feel better, right? So if you're in a relationship that's abusive and toxic, the thing to recognize right away is that something very sad and must have happened to this person who's being so toxic. And that, number one, there probably isn't anything you can do in that moment to help them. You can only focus on helping yourself, because truly your response to them is what can help them heal. And if nothing else, your response is what can help you heal. And so this is where we have to really work on our belief system and our oh, the word has escaped me for a moment, so we'll just leave it at belief system for a moment. But we really have to realize that we're not what these people are claiming we are, and that they're doing a lot of projecting. And understanding that there is help somewhere. There is help. Lorraine says, "Thank you sincerely, Linda. It's so beautiful to be acknowledged." I'm so happy to be here to be able to do that. Much love to you, Lorraine, and to everybody else watching or listening now or in the future. And remember, if you'd like to call in on the actual phone that I have here in the studio, the number's 1-907-351-3003. Or you can, after the fact, I think, because it's hard to monitor email while I'm on the show, but if you have questions that you'd like us to take up in the future, you can send them to questions@walkingthroughyourwalls.com. Getting help. Fred Rogers of great fame, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, had a quote that talked about, he said when he was scared, I don't have it in front of me, so I'm probably going to botch it a little, but basically he said that whenever he was scared or would see frightening things in the news, his mother would always suggest to him to look for the helpers. Now, remember, she's talking to a little child. And so what she's saying to him is, this is how you find the people who, these were her silent words, my interpretation. This is how you find the people who know their soul purpose and are functioning at that level. They're the helpers, because that's what we are. We come here to be in service to one another by being hope, love, and grace, with kindness and compassion. And we do that through service, which means we're the helpers. And so she was basically telling him as a child how to identify who to go to in a scary moment. And I think that that's really, it's so beautiful and it's factual. It is who you go to. You go to who you know is a helper. Now, I know that small children, even if they come to this realization, can sometimes reach out for help and be disappointed. And that can be doubly damaging. And so I think a lot of times we just adopt an attitude of, I'm just going to put up with what I've got here. I'm going to deal with what I have. And so the next best thing we can do is to give people coping skills on how to be able to process the people in their lives that are being toxic. Mr. Ziggy looks like he's on an adventure today. So I think he's asking to get down. So wave goodbye
Ziggy
to
Boo.
everybody.
Bye, Ziggy Boo.
Bye-bye, baby Zig. There we go. Okay, and have this. You want your chewing? Yeah, take your chewing. Okay. So, and Lorraine is saying, at this time in my life, I have only recently learned narcissistic behavior. Although I would have to say that I think she probably grew up with a lot of narcissistic behavior. If no one ever actually runs across the definition, it could be very easy to not realize. We've had some narcissists in the news lately, the last 4+ years, actually. Maybe we're into 6 or 7 years of a very popular narcissist. And so there's been more talk about that kind of personality disorder recently. And that's what it's labeled, actually. I'm not one for labels usually, but it's called a narcissistic personality disorder, NPD for short. Narcissists are people who believe that they're sort of the center of the universe, and they can be very very damaging in their to other people in their personal relationships because of that. Because it's not true. We are each our own universe, but we're not the center of any universe, because there's a collective. Going back to the teaching that everything is made of the same stuff, right? We are all one. And this world that we live in is truly an illusion of sorts, right? It's a magical place where everything has agreed to take the form and shape that it's in at the moment and to play this play that we're in. I think maybe this is a good place. Let me find my notes. I think this might be a good place to transition a little bit into gaslighting and into the mirror teaching, because a lot of what a narcissist will do is try to make you the blame for whatever's happening. And that's really at the core of the old spiritual teaching called the mirror teaching. The mirror teaching goes like this. Somebody says something to you, that's a reflection of you. That's them reflecting you back to you, right? This teaching came about from someone who actually was projecting, someone who did not have their own psychological stuff in order. And so it's actually the complete opposite. Because again, remember the broader teachings that Mary and I have shared over the last 29 episodes. Each of us brings the meaning to the moment. Each of us brings the meaning of anything into being. Nothing has any inherent meaning other than the meaning we give it. And that's we individually first. And then, of course, society can give things meaning. And that's the collective working together. But a lot of times the collective is not working together. in the 3D world. The collective quite often can be working against each other. And so it's your choice in any given moment who you decide to be. And this is the key. It's not about what other people say you are. It's nothing about that. It's about who you say you are through your actions and your choices. This is where you demonstrate who you are. But the thing is that you have total control over that. You and only you. So when people are coming at you and they're criticizing you, or they're telling you that you're a horrible person, or that you're a bad kid, or that you're a terrible teenager, or just whatever they're saying, whatever toxicity they're spewing at you, what you have to understand is their words are a reflection of them. That's the mirror. What they're mirroring to you is who you are in your response to them. So now let's talk about, let's say you're an adolescent and you've done something that would be labeled as bad, right? There are no bad people. We are all born pure and innocent, every single one of us. And it is our nature to be loving and giving and in service to one another. This is our nature. That's our wiring. That's who we are in our core, and our sole purpose, each one of us, is to be hope, love, and grace in form. That's why we came here. Now, most people get here, and because of it's my philosophy and belief that because of the physical requirements of coming into form, there is an energetic loss, and we lose the connection to our memories of where we came from. I'm one of the few people, Lorraine is another one of the people, but there are very few of us. There are some of us, though, that remember the other side. But most people don't. Most people, by the time they're walking and talking, they've forgotten where they came from, and quite often have forgotten their mission. Lots of times when they're little, and this is where the saying from the mouths of babes, right? When children are very little, if you listen to them, they say incredible things, magical things, amazing things. But most
Yes.
of the time, they're just told to shut up and be quiet because they don't know what they're talking about.
One of my nieces, when she was little, was drawing a picture and she wrote, "I love." And her mom was like, "You love what, honey?" And she said, "Nothing. I just love," you know. And that's the energy
Right,
when they're really little.
right, right. That's how all babies are, really. That's how we come in.
Love bombs.
We're love bombs. Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, so what happens? We end up with parents or in households uh, living with people who don't understand that we're love bombs. And a lot of times they're so broken themselves from their own childhoods and their own parents that they recreate their own childhood through you because they don't know any differently. And so when you do something that isn't appropriate, maybe you get spanked, maybe you get, grounded. It just depends on what kinds of, maybe you get screamed at, maybe you get everything you own broken. It really depends on the parent and how they're going to respond in the situation. But even if you've done something that's been labeled as bad, let's say let's say you took the car. Okay. They went out. The parents have two cars. They went out for the night. Maybe they went away for a weekend and you took their car and drove it. And let's say you wrecked it. Well, that's not a really good thing to have done, right? But as a teenager, these are very typical things that happen, because as a teenager, you're testing, you're learning, you're becoming an adult, and you're exploring. And it wasn't a good choice. I know a young man who, when he was a teenager, got together with a couple of other boys in the neighborhood, other teens, young teens, like maybe 15, and they got spray paint and they went down to the waterfront where there were all these RVs parked all along the waterfront, and they tagged them all with a bunch of them, or several of them, something, with spray paint. Now, this is not a bad person. This was not a bad kid. This was it was an act of insanity, but where it came from, I think sometimes kids can collectively come up with ideas that seem good because they're all kids. And so collectively it seems like a good idea when ultimately it's a bad idea. But he got in trouble. And he had to apologize, and he had to pay restitution, and I think he had to do community service. And he's never done anything like that again. He learned his lesson. But sometimes, and so I think, really, I believe most times when a kid acts out like that, it was a bad idea. But I think there's also something underlying. There was a cry for help there. Either he wasn't getting enough attention from his parents, he was feeling neglected. I know the kids that he did it with came from a home that was maybe not so, maybe a bit toxic itself. And so kids do things as a cry for help. When kids act out and do things that are inappropriate, that they know are not right, we should always think, what is it that they need? What is it that they're lacking? What are they asking for in this action that was inappropriate? And try to focus on healing that, addressing that and healing that. And I think what we do is we focus on punishment and non-heart-based retribution. And since what we all are is divinity in form, we're love in action here. Each one of us is a love bomb that grows up, right? Babies are love bombs, but we grow up, and we should be love, fountains when we're adults. But that doesn't really happen a lot. And so we should be focusing on, how do we help? What is this cry for need? What is the need that needs to be fulfilled here? And I think in the case of the young man I'm speaking of, it was the sudden real focus by every adult in his family, right? Not just his, and he comes from as so many children do, a broken home. So he's got multiple parents, right? And sometimes I think when that situation, you think, oh, he's got so many parents, what's the problem? But maybe all of them are sort of thinking that the other one of them is going to take the lead, and maybe nobody does. And so all of a sudden, he's got 4 parents or 6 parents, and nobody's paying any attention. So realizing that you're not bad, no matter what has been said to you, and really no matter what you've done. You may have done a lot of wrong things. Maybe you've got a whole list of things you've done. Maybe, maybe you're in jail or in prison, or having just gotten out of jail or prison. Doesn't make you a bad person. It might in general society by their labels, but not in God's eye, not in the universe's eye. There are no bad people in the universe's eye or in the divinity's world. There can be bad things. You can do bad things. That doesn't make you bad. And so that's the first thing. Most toxic parents are in some way trying to make the child take responsibility for things that aren't theirs. You're not bad. You're not bad people. None of us are bad. We're broken. Many of us are broken, but that can be fixed. That's the point, right? It's all divinity, and it's all fixable with love. That's how we fix it. That's how we fix anything, is with love. So, so in this mirror teaching, if someone's coming at you and telling you, you're a bad person, they are in some way reflecting something within themselves, not you. And remember, I know some people watching or listening might have heard me tell this story maybe more than once even. But I used to live with an aunt when I was in college. I was in junior college, and I lived with my aunt and uncle in California. And my aunt was a drunk. And she would wait up for me at night, and then she would proceed to beat the crap out of me. And as she did that, she would accuse me of all kinds of things. And I would always try to defend myself. And I learned from my first psychological or psychology teacher, Psych 101, I learned that by my defending myself, I was just giving her more energy. I was in resistance to what she was saying, but that resistance, there is a quantum physics statement, what you resist persists. And that is true. And so we had created this energy feedback loop where she would come at me and say blah, blah, blah. And I would say, no, no, no. And that would just feed her into saying more. And then she would start slapping me and hitting me and beating me. And by breaking that energetic feedback loop, just by agreeing with her, so it wasn't that I was saying I'd done those things. I was agreeing that she believed I'd done those things. And so she, had her hand up ready to slap me. And she said, you blah, 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 blah. And I said, I understand you think that. Yes. And her arm dropped because the wind went out of her sail. How can she hit me if I'm agreeing with her? And so she did it again. She thought of something new, and she went through the routine again and got the arm all cocked and ready to go. And I did the same thing. I just said, yeah, you're right. That's what you think. I see that. I wasn't saying I do that. I was just saying I see it from your point of view. And again, the wind went out of her sail. And the third time around, her arm dropped and off she went. She left the room, and she never did that again. I completely severed that energy feedback that had been created between the two of us. She was trying to perpetuate a chain of pain within herself because she was a miserable person. She was very unhappy. Nothing would make her happy. And I had just given her this way to vent herself every night by, waiting up for me and then just taking it out on me, no matter what it was. And in that one night, with 3 rounds, I extinguished the behavior. maybe not with somebody else, but it got extinguished with me, and we never did that again. I also didn't stay there much longer after that because I realized that I was worth more than what living in that toxic environment was giving me. So, the ultimate way that we help ourselves is to cultivate self love. That's the ultimate way to find a path out of the toxicity. Because we are each divine beings. And sometimes the people around us, they don't love themselves. And if they don't love themselves, then they can't, no matter what they say, actually love you. They can care for you, they can be kind to you, they can be compassionate with you. But if they're not loving themselves, if they don't know what that is, if they haven't figured that mechanism out, if they're still carrying the pain from their parents or their parents' parents, then there's nothing you can do except love yourself. Mary?
Yeah, I want to, for some people that it's the word self-love. That word love is very hard for them. So for those people who have trouble with specifically the word, if not the concept, I would like to provide positive self-regard as an alternative. You know, it's like just holding yourself in your own positive esteem, and knowing what you're worth, and if the word love is hard for you, just trying to find a different direction for you, because I know some words are loaded with some people.
Right, right. Good point. Really good point. Uh, I wanted to dig in a little bit on the definition of narcissistic for those who are listening, in case that's not necessarily a terribly familiar word. So, a narcissist, or being narcissistic, extremely self centered with an exaggerated sense of self importance. Most people are guilty of mild or occasional narcissistic behaviors, maybe some more than others, but this doesn't necessarily mean that they have a narcissistic personality disorder. So the narcissistic personality disorder is a diagnosable mental illness, right? It has a code in the uh, uh, definition book that psychiatrists use. Uh, and so there's 9 criteria. Let's see. Here's the 9 diagnostic criteria. They lack empathy. They're unwilling to recognize or identify with the feelings and needs of others. They have grandiose sense of self-importance, exaggerates achievements and talents, expects to be recognized as superior without commensurate achievements. Preoccupied with fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, beauty, ideal love. Requires excessive admiration. Believes that he or she is unique or special and can only be understood or should associate with other special high status people. They have a sense of entitlement, unreasonable expectations, and favorable treatment or automatic compliance with his or her expectations. Interpersonally exploitive, so they take advantage of others to achieve their own needs. They show arrogant, haughty behaviors or attitudes, and they're often envious of others or believe that others should be envious of them. These are very difficult people to be around if they're full blown narcissists, because they want to be king always. They're king of the world. They're king of their world. So it can be difficult to have somebody like that. And I know we talked about this a bit last week. So I'm just looking at the notes that I had made. But a narcissist will quite often use this mirroring technique uh, to try and convince you that that you're the problem, you're the reason. Uh, it's never about them. They never make mistakes. They never apologize. Usually, they're very perfect in their own world, and it's everybody else. They're people with their finger going around this way, that the cause of their experience in their life is out here somewhere, when in fact it's here. So uh, so
You were
here,
gonna
go
you were
ahead.
gonna talk about gaslighting, right? Or are you not there yet?
Yeah,
Because I
yeah,
think that's part of what you're, you know, that
right,
everything else is everybody else's fault.
right. So let's do that real quick. Let's get a definition of gaslighting for folks. Um, Gaslighting in intimate partner relationships is a manipulative, abusive tactic where a survivor begins to question their own reality. This is done by the abuser questioning facts, denying memories the survivor has, determining their judgment, and bullying them into believing the abuser's reality. Um, that's not necessarily the easiest definition. Manipulate someone using psychological methods into questioning their own sanity. So this a toxic parent will do this quite a bit as well, right? Again, it's your fault. I'm spanking you or hitting you or whatever the abuse might be at the time. Um, the problem with gaslighting is that what happens is you really do get to a point where you start to question your own reality.
Right.
And the problem with if you're a child, it's especially difficult because again, you don't have the reference points to tell you that that's what's happening,
Right.
to tell you that you're not this horrible thing that your parent is claiming you to be. You don't have any reference. And my that was the aunt was doing a lot of gaslighting. That was all about gaslighting. um
So the term gaslighting actually comes from a movie called Gaslight that starred Charles Boyer, and I forget who the woman was. And I think Angela Lansbury might have played the maid in that movie when she was very young. Anyway, the point is that there was a wife and the husband was driving her crazy, and he was using the gas lights. In the old days, they had actual gas
right,
lamps in the home.
right,
And so things would happen with the lights, like they would flicker, they wouldn't work or whatever. And then him and whoever was in cahoots with him were just telling her, no, no, that didn't happen, you're making it all up. And so when people, because it wasn't just him, there was someone in cahoots with him, as I recall. It's a very old movie I saw when I was very young. But it's like, they're telling you you're wrong, and they're united in presenting you that, your worldview is wrong and you're crazy. It's a great way
right,
to convince someone that they're crazy. If you just, so in a relationship, when things happen and they deny what happened or say it didn't happen or tell you it's your fault, like with somebody who's abusing you. And so they'll do something, and then, if you call them on it, well, that didn't happen, or I didn't mean it that way.
right, right,
When you talked about our former, gaslighter in chief, and it was
right,
like, well, I didn't say that. And if I did say it, I didn't mean that,
right,
whatever. It's like, that's the whole thing, is basically casting doubt on your version of reality.
right,
And
right,
that's what's so damaging,
right, right, right. Yes. And this happens especially to children a lot. And so this is truly the root of where this sort of damaged society that we're living in now came from. There's a whole bunch of broken parents raising broken children who are raising broken children who are raising broken children. And the only way to stop it is to break that chain of pain and to do a self-healing. In my mind, that's how we're going to heal society, is each person's going to come to the realization that they have control over not what happens to them, but how they respond to it rather than react to it. So when we're reacting, we're in knee-jerk mode. We're in housing mode. We're letting the housing decide what we're going to do. And if somebody slaps you and you turn around and slap them back, that's allowing your housing to make the decision. That's a reaction. If someone slaps you and you turn the other cheek, that's a response. That's a choice that you're making in that moment to not give in, to not perpetuate the chain of pain, to break that energy. So this was something I wanted to talk about. What most people in horrible situations don't realize and aren't thinking about in that moment is that the universe is responding to a frequency. So we tend to become consumed by our situations. And if we're living in toxic situations, we become consumed in coping within our toxic situation. And the problem with that is that the universe feels that and thinks that basically we want more of that situation because that's where our focus is. That's what we're focused on. And whatever we're focused on is like being a magnet, because we are creative beings. You know, you have to remember the larger teaching here, but we are creative beings. We are divinity in form. We are aiding and abetting everything that happens here in our frequency. And so it's counterintuitive, I think, to say that if you're in an abusive relationship, you need to stop thinking about the abuse and start thinking about a solution. If you put your energy into the solution, then what the frequency of the universe picks up on is the solution, and it will manifest. The universe doesn't respond to the words like, don't like, want, don't want. Doesn't hear those words. The universe is responding just to what you're focused on. And so it's incumbent upon us, if we're in situations that are toxic and we know are not good for us, we know we're not happy, we know that the people are doing things to us that we don't deserve to be done to, the way out of that is to focus on the way out, not to focus on what we're not liking in the moment. Mary?
Honestly, I'm a little off today, you know. I had something, but it escaped me.
Okay. No worries.
Yeah, if it comes back, I'll poke in.
So the way out of these situations is basically through them. So as a recipient of abuse, you have to learn not how to defend against, but how to rise above. And so that's what your focus needs to be on. And this is what happens when we cultivate self-love or self-care or self-respect. If the word love is a problem for you, you know, just self-respect. And this can be difficult to do when you're in a situation of abuse or other toxicity. We have to shift our thoughts from survival thoughts to thriving thoughts.
I remembered a thing I had wanted to say, which
Okay.
is like how you want to, who you want to be. Like that's what I think is good to think about and focus on,
Right.
because we don't have control over what the other person is doing. um but the part that we, it's like, and I don't even think we necessarily have control exactly over all of our reactions in this physical housing. You have to have a lot of awareness to come to control in those moments. But I think that what you can, like what I think I would cling to is, who do I want to be?
Right.
Like, this thing is happening. I don't want it to be happening. And I'm here in this moment. And what I can think about or be, that's where I would go to, is who do I want to be in this moment?
Right.
And I know, for me, that's helpful, because I know that I want as much as possible to be, like you were saying, rise above it, to be the me who is aware that the bad things that happen don't define me.
Right.
And I take the fuel, and it's like it's all grist for the mill,
Right.
and I decide what I'm going to turn it into.
Right.
Like, to me, that's what our life is about with these situations. Is this situation, it's like, the diamond forms under pressure. The situation is happening that we don't have control over. But what I can look at is, who am I going to become
Right.
in the
Right.
face of the things that have happened to me?
Right. 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 Yes. And realizing that we all have a birthright to thriving, right? And that our lives should not be filled with suffering at the hand of another,
No.
regardless of who that other might be,
Yes.
right? That this is not the framework for life that we come into. And so if we're not thriving, if we're in situations where we're surrounded by people who are really not helping us thrive, it is important to really focus on, who do you want to be, and then work on ways to make that happen, to be that. And again, if we're willing to accept our sole purpose, which is that we're each here to be hope, love, and grace with one another in service, then it becomes very easy to be what we came here to be. And what will happen is, when you're focusing on that, the universe will feel that frequency, and that frequency will then start to come to you. And this is the other thing that I think, certainly as kids, we don't realize, and as even young adults, we don't realize, is just because we can't think of a solution doesn't mean there isn't a solution out there.
Yes.
Doesn't mean that the universe doesn't have something up its sleeve,
Yes.
right? Um, I don't tend to tell too many personal stories on these conversations here, but and I'll try and do this really rather quickly. But when I was a teenager, I was miserably unhappy in my home. My mother was a chronic alcoholic, and my dad just didn't do anything to deal with her. He went to work, he came home, he went in his bedroom, and that I was just really unhappy, and I really wanted out. And I was getting ready. I had gotten my uh, I had godparents in Idaho that I had spent a portion of a summer with, and that wasn't necessarily a great household either. It was just different. They were different problems, different toxicity, but nowhere near as miserable in my estimation. And I had gotten them to agree to take me, and I had gotten my parents to agree to send me. Okay, this is me, the 15-year-old, working it out, figuring my life out because I'm miserable. But what the universe did was reach in and completely change my living circumstances. Because really, probably going to Idaho wasn't what my sole purpose had in mind. Probably wasn't part of my agenda. And although I was ready to fix my life by doing that, the universe was like, no, I think we'll do something different. And I don't mean this story to sound in any way callous, but my dad left for work one morning to go to work and had a heart attack on the way, pulled over on the side of the road. And when they finally found him, he had passed, and he had a bunch of his nitroglycerin tablets in his hand, but he was gone. And that started a chain of events that meant that by fall, I was living with an incredible, amazing foster family, maybe 40 miles away. I'm not going to go into all the details, but this is the point. The point is, I never would have imagined that. I couldn't have conjured that. But I ended up exactly where I needed to be, no doubt in my mind at all. It was exactly what needed to happen. It was a blessing. There was a lot of turmoil that went with it, but it ended up being a blessing. And I ended up better off than I had been. And so don't worry that you don't know what the solution is.
Right.
Have faith. Have faith in the universe that if you just dig in to who you are, get in touch with your soul purpose of being hope, love, and grace in service to others through whatever methods you choose, through your free will, be that person, and things will start to get straightened out.
Yeah.
You're not deserving. No one is deserving of a toxic relationship, no matter what it is or how old you are. If it's toxicity, that is those people's toxicity being reflected to you, projected to you. It is not you somehow being reflected in their behavior. That's the old mirror teaching, and it's just not true. It also used to say there's a variation on it. You can't see something in somebody else that doesn't exist in yourself. And that is also not accurate, because you can see hate in other people without having hate in yourself. You can see things that other people are doing that are not frequency of love. You can recognize that. And
Right.
that doesn't mean that you're lacking in love.
Right.
That's again a broken person teaching something that got sucked up into other people's minds and believed as true when it really isn't true. It's not true. You are not the mirror for other people's behavior. You are the mirror of your own behavior. And other people are the mirror of their behavior. And just in closing, because it ties a loop, it ties right back into Don Miguel Ruiz's 4 agreements. Be impeccable with your word, always do your best, don't make assumptions, and don't take things personally. And that's the key in the mirror teaching. You can't take it personally because they're mirroring themselves, not you. What they're saying, things that come out of somebody else's mouth, that's all about them. It's all about them. Even if what they're saying is about you, the way they're saying it, the words they're using, all about them, not you. You are love in form. That's what we all are. Mary, any closing words?
I just did want to emphasize what you said, like you were taking actions. They did not get you where you thought you were going with them. But like, I find that it's not linear. And if you just step
Right.
out and say, I want this, and you start trying,
Right.
things can happen in ways that you can't imagine.
Right.
Because the universe has everything at its fingertips.
Right.
And the other thing was, the more that you step into being love and grace and whatever all those other things are, like the more that I have just embodied my mission of being a love bomb, a love fountain
Right.
here on earth, um, the the universe does absolutely respond to that, and I have been the recipient of so much generosity all over the
Right.
place.
Right.
You know, just because I'm embodying my being of spreading love as much as I can. So
Right. Right.
that's what I wanted to emphasize.
Right. Beautiful. Thank you, Mary.
Mhm.
So with that, we'll wrap up until fall, unless, as I said, if some crisis happens and we feel, that the collective would do well uh, with a podcast, we'll do a special one. But you are light, you are love, you are divine, and I hope everyone will take the summer to cultivate that notion within themselves and work on uh, being able to release yourself from toxic environments that you may
Even,
be in.
yeah, even spending the summer thinking about the fingers pointing back at you,
Right,
spending the summer sitting quietly with yourself, even just for 5 minutes a day.
right,
Let's see who we are in the fall.
right, right. I'm excited to see you then. And until then, much love and namaste.